I cannot altogether turn because of... Αλλά είναι μια πολύ ωραία παρέα. Σας ευχαριστώ πολύ.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. I'm Ian Lesser from GMF here in Brussels. And it's really a great pleasure to have you all with us here this evening. And a particular pleasure to have with us Minister Gerapetritis, who... Are we okay with the sound?
It's echoing.
It's an echo. Maybe we can fix that. I think we have. Excellent. Well, welcome once again. Minister, great to have you with us. We're going to come back to you in a moment, but let me give you maybe just a little roadmap to what we're going to do this evening. We are going to turn from here to our office in Washington, actually, where Heather Conley, president of GMF, will say a few words of welcome from the Washington side. And we'll come back here. I'll be very pleased to turn to Ambassador Alexander Philon to say a word or two very briefly as well, because this is the third annual Philon lecture. And we'll say a little bit about what how that came to be and why it's important for us. But first, let me turn to Heather, if you're with us in Washington, and hand it over to you.
Welcome. On behalf of the entire German Marshall Fund team, it is fantastic to be with you virtually. Thank you so much for all of you who are joining us in Brussels as well as online today. Nothing could give us greater privilege than hosting the third annual edition of the Philon Lecture. It's a lecture that is designed to honor the distinguished and extraordinary career of Ambassador Alexander Philon, of course, who is with us, with you, Ian, in Brussels today. Ambassador Philon has had an extraordinary career, but we count him as one of our own in Washington because he served with such distinction twice in Washington during very consequential moments for the transatlantic relationship. Thank you, Ambassador Philon, for being such an extraordinary Atlanticist and such a strong proponent of strengthening the Greek-American relationship. This series is made possible through the generous support of the Alexander Philon Fund for Transatlantic Partnership. This important partnership fund supports our Mediterranean work, which has just increased in its importance, as well as our signature leadership program, the Marshall Memorial Fellowship Program. So a special thanks as well to Fokion Potamianos for his generous support for not only our work, but his close involvement with this series. And of course, our media partnership, we couldn't do this without Kathimerini, of course, wonderful coverage of foreign and international issues. So to top it all off, we have an extraordinary Marshall Memorial Fellow from the class of 2003 joining us for this lecture. Of course, that is Greek Foreign Minister Georgios Gerapetritis. We are so grateful at this critical moment, perhaps the most dangerous moment for the international system over the last 5 decades. We have such clear thought leaders who can help us navigate through these many challenges, the largest land war in Europe, an unfolding conflict in the Middle East, tensions in the Indo-Pacific. I can't think of a better person to help us understand all this complexity and the transatlantic relationship's importance than the Greek foreign minister. So again, many thanks from the German Marshall Fund here in Washington. Ian, I send that back to you, and I can't wait to hear this great conversation.
Well, Heather, thank you very, very much for being with us, and thank you for those words. And let me just echo Heather's thanks. It's great to have this conversation. It's billed as a lecture, but of course, as you can see here, it's not really that. It's a conversation. And we're really delighted on many levels to have you with us. You've had a distinguished career in academia and law, and you've been foreign minister since June 2023, I think. You've had an exciting period in which you've arrived in that role. And as Heather began to suggest to us, this is not an easy time in the international system.
I've been better in the past.
And so maybe I could start first to ask you, Mr. Minister, just from a Greek perspective, just give us a little bit of a sense of how are you making sense of this extremely chaotic international scene, and how are you prioritizing among these various challenges that we're all aware of?
We're living in an era of chaos, and the truth is that there is an interoperability of things which produce results that are totally unexpected. And to be honest, the most important thing we're trying to do is to do some foresighting, to work on what-if scenario, because in fact, nobody can predict what is happening the day after. So what we're doing is to have a proper response to any potential scenario. So this is what we're trying to do. And you know, this is especially true when it comes to a medium-sized country such as Greece, which indeed has earned a huge diplomatic capital in the last few years because of the achievements of the government. But yet, we are a relatively medium-small country, and when you have these characteristics, it's always a huge challenge to work in this volatile environment. We have decided to go based on principles. This is our idea, and I think this pays off because I think we have treated all huge challenges in the same pattern, in the same principled way. And I think nobody can accuse us today of being either transactional or volatile. So for us, this is an important moment. We feel very confident that we can treat all challenges to the benefit of the country. And we can be significant diplomatic actors in our region and globally. And we're very proud for this.
Minister, thank you very much. I have a whole list of things I'm eager to talk to you about, but I'm going to also do something which I want to do now and turn to Alexander Philon for a brief word, just to provide some context for our conversation. Alexander, thank you for being with us. And
can I just do it from here?
Absolutely.
Well, you know why it was set up. It was set up because when I was in the US, I would talk about the issues of the Eastern Mediterranean, and you could see people saying, well, why? I mean, why is it important? Why are you insisting about these issues? And unfortunately, now we have seen everything that has happened in our area. To begin with, the Ukraine, the effect it's had on all of us, including the United States, of course. But now Gaza, and this was issues that we have been dealing with for years in Greece. We have helped very often to get some help when we helped move the Palestinian leadership in the early 80s, 82. Greek ships moved them to Tunisia at some point. Other points, they call on Greece to help out. When, in Libya, for example, we were asked by the Chinese to get their workers out. Who would come? It was Greece who came to help. Now it was China, it was the other. So we are there always to help and to add something. And now this crisis is giving us also an opportunity to play a role. As the minister said, we may not be a big country, but we can be there, and we can be there at the right moment and do the right thing and to help move issues ahead. Alexander. That's why I think these series bring into focus what we can do with our allies, with our countries next to us, with, in the case European Union, we had at least 2 countries very close to the area with Cyprus. We could all help.
Alexander, thank you very, very much. And it's a wonderful preamble, actually, to my short list, actually. It's not endless. But lots of things to talk about. I mean, you were here for the Foreign Affairs Council, and there was also a special conversation on the Western Balkans. I'd like to talk about that. But maybe a place to start is to talk exactly as Alexander was suggesting about the situation in the Eastern Mediterranean itself, in light of the current crisis in the Middle East and in Gaza. I mean, what is your reading of this? And from a Greek perspective, where do you see Greece being able to, in a sense, add some value in this tremendous insecurity?
It's a very difficult region, and it's been like this for centuries, so it's not something new. And it's something predictable that we will have our ups and downs in the broader region. What is happening now in the Middle East is really horrible, though, because we had the horrific terrorist attack of the 7th of November, which completely changed the perception of terrorism, I think, because we saw some images which were absolutely beyond conception, even in terms of terrorism. So it completely upgraded the terrorism attack. But my understanding of the situation is that Hamas were essentially trying to intervene between the Arab states and the Arab people. Because exactly they could see that there were some Arabic states which were pretty moderate in their reactions, and they could actually see a future of rapprochement with Israel, which for Hamas, I think it's beyond any sort of idea. So what they really wanted were to differentiate people from governments. And they have actually partly succeeded, because you can see now that there is a trend towards a more radical approach in the Arab world, and there has been a Manichaeism which is not constructive, because either you are with Israel or you are with the Arab world and with Palestine. We do not see things like this. As I mentioned, Ian, for us it's a matter of principle. And this is exactly what we said from the very beginning, because what happens is it's a horrible situation, and what we said from the beginning was that first we have to condemn altogether terrorism, inhumane treatment, any sort of aggression. Secondly, there is no room for any sort of hostages or abductees. Third, there is a right of self-defense, but only within international law context, which means that the reaction must be in proportion with the action. Then civilians ought to be protected. There must be humanitarian corridors altogether in order to allow for humanitarian aid to flow without any hindrances. And then there should be an international summit in order to discuss about the day after. For us, there are two premises which are of key significance. First, we need to differentiate Hamas from Palestinian people. This is very crucial, because it is the basic understanding that we have to enhance now if we're going to work for the day after. And secondly, we need to deal with the root problem. And the root problem is the non-implementation of the resolutions of the Security Council of the UN. We need to work for the post-war era, and this situation needs to have an endpoint. And the endpoint, by all means, should be the two-state solution, with the geography, the pre-1967 geography, and the Eastern Jerusalem as the capital city of Palestine. When it comes to Greece, I think that this principled policy has made us very credible discussions with both the Arabic worlds and with Israel. We can talk with both of them. We can be reliable interlocutors. I talk to my colleagues from the Arab worlds very often, almost every day. I talk to my Israeli counterparts very often. We provide solutions. The roadmap that I mentioned a couple of minutes ago concerning our basic 5 points, they were expressed the day after of the horrible terrorist attack of the 7th of November, and it was incorporated per se in the conclusions of the European Council of the 26th of October. So this is a tangible result, but the truth is that we will stand with the Israelis. They are our strategic partners, but there can be no blank check for the reaction against terrorism. And, you know, I keep on saying that Israel is a democratic state, and this makes a difference. It makes a difference because democratic states are accountable, and in order to be accountable, you need to be proportionate.
Can I ask you, are you optimistic about the prospects for a humanitarian corridor, a maritime corridor for assistance, whether in the near term or the long term?
Now we're actually turning ourselves to technicians as well, because the truth is that this plot is extremely difficult to be implemented because there are no safe ports in the Gaza region. So in order to implement this plan, you need to fulfill two premises. The first is to have the agreement of Israelis. Any sort of sustainable humanitarian corridor needs to be approved by the Israelis in order to become safe. And the second thing is that you need to set up infrastructures. And in order for us to develop infrastructures, we need to have a humanitarian pause. What we're saying, and this exactly was one of the initiatives of the Greek government, was to try and suggest that we need to have an immediate humanitarian pause. Why having a humanitarian pause? Because we think that this should be a first step, a short-term pause that would allow first for the injured people to have proper treatment, or those who need to get out in order to receive this treatment. Secondly, to actually try and make correct all the infrastructures that have been disrupted. Thirdly, to allow for sustainable humanitarian corridors, so as to allow uninhibited humanitarian aid to just come in Gaza. Then fourthly, to see whether we could have resources which are absolutely essential for the well-being of the people. For example, we could have some desalination techniques in order to allow for potable water to be in Gaza. So a series of things that could be applicable, but in order to be able to have that type of humanitarian sea corridor or any other sustainable humanitarian corridor, you need to have a humanitarian pause. There is no other way to implement this.
Okay. Mr. Minister, there is also a war going on in Europe. And I wanted to ask you your perspective on the war in Ukraine, and in particular this question which one hears debated about whether what's happening in the Middle East in some sense, especially in Europe, but potentially in the United States as well, will sort of distract us from that ongoing commitment. That was not the conclusion, as I understand it, of the Council discussion. It's not been the result in terms of commitments that have been made, new ones from France and Germany and others. But what's your reading? What's your understanding of where we are?
I'm pretty positive that Putin would like to be distracted from the worldwide opinion, public opinion, and the governments. What is actually happening in Ukraine is deeply appalling. There is an aggression on the part of Russia against Ukraine, which goes against any sort of international law principles and rules. It is unprovocative. It goes against the basic of humanitarian values and essentially turns against all the Western words. We need to stay unanimous on this, and I think this is why the transatlantic links do matter at this moment, because we need to have some feasible reaction. It was very impressive. I think it was indeed impressive, the fact that we had such a unanimous reaction, the whole of the West, a unanimous reaction when it came to the Russian aggression. But now we need to face further challenges. And if I may, I think there are two challenges. The first challenge is the premise, the West against the rest, because there is a developing tendency to see the West as a united thing, and you need to completely differentiate the situation. It's not the West which is a single unit. It's the moral principles which are embodied in the Western way of thinking, and we're like-minded with many Western countries. But on the other hand, we can see, Ian, that even within the Western alliance, there are some voices which are contrary to our basic idea. There are swing voters, or there are countries which may have some more transactional approach to foreign policy. I think we need to stay very solid, and this is why I think the transatlantic cooperation is still a sine qua non coalition, and I think we should just stick with this and try to develop further, because the idea is that the situation is not going to get any better. It could only get worse.
So sticking with your region, maybe I could ask you a little bit about the situation in the Eastern Mediterranean, or more specifically in the Aegean. Obviously, for Europe and the United States, there's a very strong stake in an Aegean détente, if I can put it that way. And in recent months, at least, there has been what I think we could probably describe that way between Ankara and Athens. You could say a little bit about this. I mean, how significant, how durable do you judge it to be?
It takes two to tango, as you know, Ian. So I can speak for my country, and I will express a sincere view on the matter. We live in the same neighborhood. This is geography, and the one thing you cannot change in life is geography. So we have to learn to live together, for me and for the government. And I think for the vast majority of the Greek people, it is an opportunity to try and establish a long-term relationship of calmness and tranquility in our neighborhood. I think it's an interesting time slot, because we have two governments which do have strong mandates, very fresh mandates, fresh and strong mandates. We have two leaders who seem to be very keen on developing bilateral relations, to abandon the hostile rhetorics of the past, and to see the future generations. Of course, we have two Ministers of Foreign Affairs which are not strictly speaking political, so they don't have to bear huge political costs. But so they have a different view on matters, and it is true that we have developed, I think, a very frank and sincere relationship with my Turkish counterpart. Apparently, he has been a
Marshall Memorial Fellow as well.
An MMF scholar as well. So apparently, you're doing a very good recruitment when it comes to future politicians and policymakers and influencers. So well done, congratulations. No, the situation is like this. We're not naive. We do not have a head in the sand attitude. We know that we cannot solve differences which last for decades, if not centuries, through an approach of a few months. What we're trying to do, though, is to make things work in the sense that we do not want any sort of dispute or differentiation to produce a crisis. Because what was happening in the past was that just a small thing could just produce a huge crisis in the Aegean, because it was a very volatile environment, and we didn't have the actual networks of speaking to each other. I believe a lot in deliberative processes. I think that if we have an open channel of communication and we do share some sort of rationality, it's difficult not to agree on the basics. I do not expect that we're going to share everything with Turkey. We do have some fundamental differences, and it is obvious now with the Middle East situation, we do start from a completely different starting point. But the truth is that we can discuss for our bilateral relations and for the future of our peoples. And in my part, I would like to exhaust all possibilities to try and set up an environment of friendly and good neighborly relationship. And obviously, we're going to take this step by step, because it's not easy to try and work all things together. Today, we had the first session of confidence building measures among our representations in Ankara. It took place 4 years after the last negotiation. It took us 4 years to resume. So I think it's a positive day today. But on the other hand, I think it's very important that for the last almost 10 months, we do not have any overflights. We do not have any violations in the Aegeans. We are in speaking terms. We can talk as neighbors, not always friends, but neighbors and reasonable individuals. So yes, I am relatively optimistic, but we need to take this step by step to work for the tranquility in our regions, for the sustainable prosperity of our people. And I think we should try and work things out, and especially when it comes to issues which have been very, very difficult and acute for ages. I am one of those people who believe that inertia is not a good thing. I want to discuss things, even if they're very difficult and we disagree. I think dialogue could produce positive results, and according to my Prime Minister's mandate, this is what I'm going to do.
Bravo.
Thank you.
Well, we look forward to that, and we all appreciate that activism. Let me ask you about another neighboring region, the Western Balkans. There was even a discussion today.
That's a great neighborhood we're living in.
Yeah, well, it's a difficult one, but then the world is becoming rather difficult too, so the context is changing. But maybe say a word about that, the Greek perspective on the region, the perspectives for Euro-Atlantic integration of the region in the future. How do you see it?
To start with, I think it's very important to further develop our good bilateral relations with NATO. And now I'm speaking in my head as a member of the European Union Foreign Ministers Council. I think it is important to be like-minded in things. And I think, indeed, the last couple of years, our understanding has been more thorough, more deep. And I think it's a high level of awareness and understanding. This is very important. It is also important that both organizations are trying to enlarge themselves, to take on new members, and to deepen their respective organizations. I think this could end in mutual benefit. Now, when it comes to the Western Balkans, you know that Greece was the initiator of the 2003 Thessaloniki Agenda, and it was a landmark year for us and for our region, because it was stated in a very categorical way that the Western Balkans' future lies with the European family, and I think this is absolutely important. Why? Because the truth is that history proves that the Western Balkans has been the arena of huge competition, not only by Europeans, but also from other countries. And I think it is important to try and keep them within the European family. The truth is that the developments have not been very rapid. It's a slow-moving process. We know that enlargement is institutionally a very tricky part when it comes to the European Union, and it requires unanimity, and it requires huge concessions. But I think there is a steady pace. We had the report on the Western Balkan countries a few days ago. The report was relatively optimistic. There was a vision for the future concerning the Western Balkans. Obviously, there are some instrumental things that needs to be treated. And today we had our joint ministerial meeting with the Western Balkan ministers. And indeed, it is a great prospect, I think, for Europe if we could enhance the Western Balkans. We will do anything in our power to assist this prospect. Obviously, there are things that need to be sorted out. There are some preconditions that need to be met, some conditionalities. But we're here to work with our neighbors, and I hope that in the medium term we will be able to welcome our Western Balkan neighbors in the European family.
Great. Now, let me also say we have a substantial audience online, and so I want to go to all of you in the room, but also if there are questions from our online audience, you can easily send those in, and we will try to get to them. And I'm going to save some time for that. But if you'll allow me just one question before we do that, Mr. Minister, maybe say a word about Greek-U.S. relations. I think we'd all agree probably that they're now at a, can we say, a high point historically? I think it's true to say. That's been true across multiple Greek governments and multiple American administrations in recent years. Say a little bit about that. I mean, obviously, this is a question dear to our heart as an American organization. Look forward to hearing what you're going to say.
This is such an easy question to respond because I think we're now at the heyday of our bilateral relationship. We have a very common understanding. We've been very credible with our American friends, and we will keep on being like this. We firmly believe that the strategic alliance with the United States is of paramount importance for Greece. We firmly believe that we belong to this Western family, the alliance of the Western countries and the US. And I think this is absolutely to the mutual benefit. As you probably know, Greece has been one of the major contributors of NATO when it comes to the defense expenses. This is not a good thing, but this is a fact. Geography comes again here. Yep. But last year we had the greatest percentage of defense expenditure among the NATO allies. And we have been above the threshold of 2% vis-à-vis GDP for the last many years. Indeed, we've been more than 3% for the last few years. We need to do this. We're very credible, and we will keep on fulfilling our commitments. We do have a common understanding with the American government. We have in progress many developing projects. We have the Alexandroupolis project, the port, and obviously the LNG storage that we're trying to construct. My country will soon become an energy hub in many respects, not only because there are going to be too many corridors passing through Greece, but also because Greece will be a major producer in renewable energy sources. So I think it's very important to further develop our links with the United States, and I'm happy to discuss very often with the ambassador and my fellow ministers, and I think this will only go to the better.
Okay, thank you. Let me open it up to all of you. And so do just raise your hand, tell us if you could who you are and where you're from, and we'd be very happy to get, there's a microphone that'll be passed to you. Maybe I can start right over there. It's sort of a little difficult to reach, but please.
Good evening. Henning von Stein from O-Ton, doing public affairs here in Brussels since quite a while, 30 years. Greece, Minister, being in that situation you described, what is the European effect on that, let's say, room for maneuver in diplomatic terms? How does that work, the levels interacting? Thank you.
This is a very provocative question. Because the most provocative question is the question that you know the answer, but you just want to hear it out from a minister. European Union, it's such a difficult thing to discuss. The European Union is historically, I think, the most ambitious project that has emerged worldwide, because it embraces a number of member states which, the truth is, are not always like-minded, and they do not have the same historical or cultural roots, but they do coincide together, and you must make serious concessions in order to try and work things out. This is the first premise. The second premise is that, as you know, the European Union is not always operating as a single unit. For example, we have the Eurozone, which is a subtotal of the European Union. We have the Schengen zone, which is another subtotal. We do have a lot of subtotals within the European Union, so there are different layers. The third issue is that on many occasions there are different interests from member states. Sometimes there are conflicting interests among the member states. But we have learned, to a certain extent, to make the necessary concessions. I was very happy yesterday, probably it was my best day as a foreign minister, because we made it to have a joint statement concerning Middle East from the High Representative, Josep Borrell, because I've been working on this in the last 10 days, and it was almost impossible to get unanimity for this, because there were member states who were very vocal in favor of a strong attitude in favor of Israel, and there were other members which were very vocal concerning the ceasefire and the rights of the Palestinians to actually create a state and prevent hostilities when it comes to civilian attacks. But we did find a landing zone. And it was not the common denominator. It was a proper, morally justified landing zone. So we have learned to work with concessions. The fourth premise is the most difficult, because the truth is that the EU architecture is a very complicated mix of checks and balances and the aberration of a federation. Because you do have 27 member states which are sovereign states, so there's not a federal state with one sovereignty, but yet you have unanimity. And you have unanimity in many respects when it comes to foreign external policy and defense policy. And this is a huge problem when you don't have a very solid background of all member states. So now we are discussing, we have opened the discussion. Our parliamentarians here will definitely know about it, this vibrant discussion of whether it should be appropriate to change the decision-making process and allow for a more flexible procedure with a qualified majority instead of unanimity on some or all issues of external policy and defense policy. This is not an easy discussion, because unanimity is essentially the overriding right of the small countries to defend themselves against the big countries. So it's not an easy thing. On the other hand, there are many occasions where you just want to have the qualified majority instead of unanimity. And I've been in this position because there are a couple of countries which are opposing very evident decisions, and you just want to make it happen, but you cannot. But I think it's probably a golden rule in order to have a union of member states with different historical backgrounds. We like to say that we're like-minded. This is to some extent artificial. The truth is that the European Union has been the most successful experiment, I think, in the history.
Okay. We'll go just right over here, perhaps the woman in the front, and then we'll go to the
I also take questions in Greek.
Please, just here and then there.
In Greek or in English?
Whatever. I'm sure Ian
For me,
will,
English,
Ian will
I wish my
translate it
Greek were
into
better.
English.
English is fine. Thank you. For me.
First of all, thank you very much for such a vibrant discussion, both of you. You mentioned something.
Do tell us who you are so that we...
I'm Olga Cosmidou, former Director General of the European Parliament. You mentioned unanimity. We are a small country with open issues, which is a condition for wanting unanimity. On the other hand, we are not blind, and we see, as you already said, that if we want an enlargement, this cannot go on like this. Which is the official position of Greece on this subject?
You don't really expect me to say this in public.
No, I don't.
Well, even a hint.
Okay, I will give you a hint. The default position of a small, medium EU country is that they support the unanimity rule. This is the default position. Why, Thanasis, are you nodding? Do you agree? Or? I agree. Okay, good. On the other hand, what is happening is we're not blind with what is happening, and we really see how the situation stands. And most importantly, Greece will always be constructive in things. We will not be the ones that will keep the European Union behind. On the other hand, we do have some legitimate national interests that we need to protect. We do have our constitutional identities. But at least now, and I can speak for the contemporary government, this government is clearly pro-European. We consider Europe our home, and we will do everything in our power to make it work effectively, because we think that when Europe goes well, then Greece goes well.
Okay. Please.
Michael Swan, working for the European External Action Service. Greece is a candidate for the UN Security Council 25-26. The next year is a very busy one for multilateralism, preparing for the summit of the future that should reform the multilateral system. How do you see the challenges now facing the UN and the multilateral system more largely? Thank you.
If I knew, I would have said no. It's probably the most...
I didn't ask you that one, but it's a wonderful question, actually.
It's probably the most demanding interview I've had in the last 4 months. It's a very difficult situation. The thing is that, by all means, we need to revisit the UN system. Because we can see now that there is no way to overcome the Security Council decisions, and the Russian membership does not make it any easier. Essentially, it makes it absolutely impossible to take any sort of rational decision. So there is a problem. On the other hand, we have to take into account that this system has been operating for almost 70 years, and it's been quite effective. As all organizations, the UN employs a system of checks and balances and accountability, which is akin to the idiosyncrasy of the organization. I think, especially when it comes to the United Nations, we have to be more bold, more brave, and we need to take some serious upgrade decisions. I think the decision-making process within the European nations has been rather obsolete, and we have to work on this. We do have the example now with the accountability issue when it comes, for example, with the Russian aggression against Ukraine. There is no way to actually hold someone accountable because of the Security Council members' veto. We need to actually revisit the whole situation. And, you have to do some forward thinking. The United Nations architecture was superb when it came, but now the challenges are much more sophisticated, and this is why we need to have a sophisticated mechanism of decision making. So, yes, it's going to be a very challenging year next year. We will be at the heart of this discussion because hopefully 2025 Greece will be a non-permanent member of the Security Council, and we have done, I think, a very good job. And I think, once again, we will be at the heart of all the international developments. But the truth is that the world is changing so rapidly that you cannot think of today. The most difficult task is to do some meaningful foresighting. And this is what we're trying to do. We're not thinking about today, not even for the year after. What we're trying to do is to respond to all possible scenarios for the next decade.
Minister, we were having a little conversation before we started here, and we were chatting about this very issue. I mean, maybe just to say a word, just to follow up on that. I mean, about how do you encourage that in your concept of diplomacy, to have more foresight, more to work that into the system somehow?
The truth is that this is not an easy task. We're trying to develop our diplomacy as a multifaceted project. We're trying to have, as I say, a polycentric diplomacy, which means that first we want to become much more active. What I saw when I first went to the foreign ministry was that the majority of the job took place in a reactive manner instead of a proactive manner, and I really want to change this mindset. We need to think more properly and to have a vision for the future instead of trying to react to things. And what I'm trying to do now within the ministry is to try and employ all types of new diplomacy, because the conventional diplomacy is a very good thing, and we all know how it operates, and it has been successful for many, many decades. But now there are other modules that we need to employ. For example, the soft power mechanisms are key actors. We do have, for example, in our case, a huge diaspora that we need to activate. We have our cultural heritage, which is a significant plus factor. We do have our language. We do have public diplomacy. We need, and I keep on saying this, we need to rebrand our country, and we need to see our country in the next 10 or 20 or 30 years. And that's how we're trying to develop it. We're trying to reorganize, to reset the offices and services of the Greek foreign minister in order to respond to contemporary challenges and to employ all these models. I will just give you a tiny example. There are some big policies, horizontal policies, that we consider very essential. For example, energy policy. Nobody would have ever thought that energy would have been such a key factor today. But the thing is that in the last 10 years, energy has become #1 diplomacy factor. And wherever I go abroad, the first thing to discuss is how to develop energy policy. And we're doing now huge projects in Greece and the Eastern Mediterranean. We're having gas interconnectors. We have the Grezi project with Egypt, which has been acclaimed an endorsement by the European Commission as a project of mutual interest. We do have a lot of projects. So we are trying to focus on diplomatic modules which are different, contemporary, modern, vibrant, and we're pretty positive that we will make it at the end.
Okay, thank you. We have a couple of questions that have come in online, and let me take one that it could be a very long conversation in its own right.
Obviously.
But it's sort of an essential question these days, which is how is Greece managing its relationship with China these days?
I was hoping that I would finish before this question. It's not an easy relationship. We do have good bilateral relationships. There are a couple of very significant Chinese investments in Greece, most importantly the Piraeus port. And the truth is, because I want to be totally honest, that the Piraeus port has now augmented, has become a huge port. I come from Piraeus, so I do have a legitimate interest to say that we're doing perfectly. Yet, we all know that China is a difficult actor, and everybody knows that the Chinese-American relations are not at their peak. So we are very cautious, but as I mentioned, Ian, we do have a principled policy, and I think this is something that every country really appreciates. We know how to develop our relations. We're always open and frank with other states, and that's what we're doing with China as well. On the other hand, we're trying to also develop other alliances in the broader region. We have an excellent relationship, bilateral relationship with India. We are part of the Indian corridor, starting from India, going through Middle East, ending to the Mediterranean. This is both an energy and an economic corridor. Greece is going to be a vital part of this corridor. So with our polycentric diplomacy, we do have some strong regional alliances which allow us to prevent any sort of over-reliance. This is something that we attribute huge energy and importance. We do not want to have any sort of over-reliance. And that was a lesson that we learned from the crisis in Ukraine, because as most of European countries, we had a tremendous over-reliance on Russian gas. More than 40% of Greece import gas came from Russia. And we had to actually make a diversification. And we made it by increasing the energy mix of the country. Now we're very proud to say that only in the last couple of years, we have inserted into the energy mix more than 50% of renewables, which is one of the top rankings in Europe. So for us, it's very important to have a diversified diplomacy and bilaterals, but also to have an autonomous policy, not relying immensely on other actors.
I'm conscious of our time. If you'll allow us to take one last question, and
absolutely,
we'll go right over here, please. And there should be a microphone that can come to you.
Thank you. So,
do tell us who you are and where you're from.
That's how I wanted to start. My name is Jörg Meuthen. I'm a German politician and a member of the European Parliament. And that's my point. I'm deeply worried about what's going on in the Parliament concerning the war at Gaza. I have one very concrete question. If I listen, for example, to the High Representative Joseph Borrell and to many other members of the Parliament, they all request for a concrete ceasefire. And according to my strong conviction, that would be the request to Israel to commit some kind of suicide of the nation. According to my mind, it's completely impossible to have a complete ceasefire right now. You mentioned, when you talked about it, to make humanitarian pauses. And I think that's clear, and that's what the Israelis already do, to have small pauses for a few hours to get civilians out of the dangerous area. But more and more people around the world are requesting for a complete ceasefire. And I said, what is my position on that? I think it's completely impossible if Israel wants to survive in this surrounding. And I would be interested in your concrete position on that. Thank you very much for your answer.
Please promise me that this is the last question.
I promise you.
Okay, thank you. Otherwise, I'm not responding to this. I'm trying to be as punctual as possible. Myself, I'm not speaking about ceasefire. I'm speaking about humanitarian pauses, and I think this is very important. On the other hand, the truth is that at some point, what we really want is peace. Peace in the Middle East. So the thing is how we achieve this peace. And the truth is that we all agree in this room that Israel has a right to self-defense. But on the other hand, we also all agree that how Israel exercises self-defense is of importance as well. What I am saying is that we need immediately to have humanitarian pauses in order to allow for humanitarian aid and humanitarian corridor to be established. In my eyes, it's morally unacceptable to have such a tension and to see tens of thousands of people just being killed in the region. I think, and this is the view of my government, I think that if we make it to actually have humanitarian pauses, short-term humanitarian pauses, then I think there is going to be a momentum towards peace that might result eventually in a peace situation altogether. Because, if there is some sort of a pause, then we can see what is actually happening in Gaza, because the truth is that there's huge misinformation and disinformation concerning Gaza. Nobody really knows what is happening. We do have some very strong images from Gaza, but we just assume that some of them or all of them are accurate. So what needs to happen now is, I think, that we need to have a pause. And I think that Israel would agree to this because as I said, it's a democratic state. And if you're a democratic state, you allow for this humanitarian pause. I can see your point. I can see the point of many governments, European governments, that you cannot actually claim for a ceasefire, because that would tantamount essentially to upholding the blackmailing by Hamas. I can see the point. I can absolutely see the point. But on the other hand, you have to see the point of the necessity to have some sort of a pause to identify what is happening, to allow for those in need to get the essentials, and to allow for injured people to get proper medical treatment. So I think we all agree in this room. It's, of course, this is a much smaller scale than the European Parliament, so we can all agree here because we're almost 100 instead of many hundreds. But I think that we need to take some immediate and proper action on this.
Mr. Minister, thank you very, very much indeed.
I was expecting this for
please
minutes.
Join me in thanking him.
Thank you so much for coming.
You are very patient and very open and very frank and direct.
I have to give you, though, the fact, because I was a German Marshall Fund scholar, I really wanted to come because I think this is a small trade-off I have to give you, because everybody thought, when I have it in my resume, that I was a German speaker. So everybody wants to consider that, he's speaking like English, English, French, Italian, German, whatever. So thank you for this. It's been a great honor to...
We continue to be thankful to you. So thank you, Mr. Minister. Allow me also some additional thanks this evening. First of all, huge thanks to the Philon Fund for Transatlantic Partnership, and in particular to Fokion Potomianos and also Ambassador Philon for being here with us. We're very, very grateful.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Let me also thank Ambassador Yanis Vrelas and your whole team at the mission. It's been an absolute pleasure and always a pleasure to do this. Let me thank Kathimerini also for being our media partner for this, which has helped in the outreach tremendously, and we're always very grateful for that. Let me thank my GMF colleagues as well, and there are many of them around, but in particular Alberto and Amin. Thank you very, very much for putting this together in an extremely professional way. And thanks to all of you for joining us here in person, but also our online audience. We look forward to having you with us at GMF again soon. So a very good evening to you, and please join us for the reception for those.
Thank you so much. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
so
much.
And it was